Hi everyone, Joe March here with the Grand Infinity, and today I'm talking about everyone's favorite topic, meditation. This video is aimed at 3 different types of listeners, but I believe these 3 cover most of my listeners. First, there's the beginners. Anybody who reaches out to me on Facebook and says, how do I get started with magic? My answer has always been meditation, but I'm not sure if that's as clear as I've wanted it to be, so this video is actually going to explain what I mean by that. Secondly, there's the advanced practitioners who are listeners. These are people who already have a strong spiritual or magical practice, but tune into my videos because they're interested in what a fellow practitioner has to say about the subject. I guarantee to those listeners that we're going to talk about this in a way that most people don't talk about it and that I haven't talked about it before, so it'll still be interesting to you even if you already know this content. Lastly, there's those who tune in because they want to follow my personal progress. While my lecture series shows how I used to do magic, I don't really do it the same way anymore. I've alluded to the fact that I mostly do magic without using any rituals or tools anymore, but I haven't explained how I do that exactly. This video will endeavor to give you the bulk of that as well, because what I'm about to talk about today is how I do absolutely everything now. This video is not dedicated to tips for how to do meditation. It's more about the states that you're trying to get into with meditation, because that's what's actually important. People often get caught up whenever they first get started in which form of meditation they should be doing. That's not so important as the fact that you do meditation and get into the right states. If you've got a form of meditation you're looking into and it seems interesting, use that form of meditation. Use the information I'm going to provide here to see if you're getting out of it what you're supposed to be getting out of it, and to make sure that your meditation is beneficial. Since people will inevitably ask me anyway, the type of meditation that I perform is the most basic type of meditation called the 3-folds breath. To do this, sit comfortably or stand in a position that makes it easy for you to get breath in and out of your lungs. Breathe in for 3 seconds through your nose, hold for 3 seconds, then breathe out for 3 seconds. Then repeat. Breathe in, 1, 2, 3, hold, 1, 2, 3, breathe out, 1, 2, 3. It's that simple. While you're doing this, keep your attention on your breath and try to let any fleeting thoughts that come to mind just pass through you. Don't pay attention to them. If you succeed at doing that 4 or 5 minutes, you've successfully meditated. It's a very basic, easy way to do meditation. Other forms of meditation have their own pluses and minuses, but if you just want something simple to get you started, try the 3-folds breath. So if the method of meditation isn't that important, what is important? What you do with your mind during it. A lot of people will tell you that meditation is a practice to stop thinking, or to be in the moment. I'm guilty of using these 2 explanations as well. But I was actually watching a video from another practitioner, J.A. Ragnarsson, and it inspired me to make this video. I'll put the link to his video in the description below, and I suggest you check it out after this video, or even pause the video now and go check it out. I agree with everything he puts forth in that video, and it's why I felt this clarification was needed for my own videos. Ragnarsson says, people get confused because they think meditation is about not thinking, when in fact meditation is about thinking about a single thing, or focusing. This is absolutely correct, and an area of confusion that I hadn't recognized until this point. When people like me say meditation is a practice to stop thinking or be in the moment, we aren't saying that you shouldn't be thinking at all while meditating. It isn't the absence of all thought. What we're actually referring to by thinking in this particular case is stray thoughts, or being pulled away by thoughts, or being out of control of your thoughts, if that makes sense. As Ragnarsson says, the method that you need to use to get pulled into meditation correctly is focus. You need to focus on something, and that is in and of itself a thought of a certain form. The most common example is focus on your breath. When we say focus on your breath and let go of your thoughts, you still think about focusing on your breath, but that's fine. It's the task at hand. You're focusing on a single thing very strongly. And what you're shying away is any thoughts not about that thing. It's a method of learning to control your thoughts to be able to keep focused on a task at hand. It may help some people to think of this as strength training for your mind. When you're first doing these exercises, the primary thing that you're going to be doing is getting used to focusing on one thing and pushing away the other thoughts not related to that thing. After you've done this for a long time, you start to be able to do this without being in any kind of specific meditative stance or doing any kind of breathing. You'll start noticing that you have fewer stray thoughts throughout the day as well, that your thoughts remain on point and on target and on task. That's the goal. You're training your mind to do what you want it to do, as opposed to whatever flights of fancy come into your head. However, that training is only the beginning of this process. Continuing meditation practices day in and day out is like going to the gym and exercising that part of your mind to keep that training going, but eventually it becomes about something else. You start to be able to use the meditation to get into different states with your mind. This, of course, requires that you already have practiced it enough to get control over your thoughts. But once you've reached that point, you can hit this next level of meditation. I've basically broken this next section into two different ways to use meditation. One is meditation for grounding, and the other is meditation for trance. In the past, when I've simply said meditation, I've been talking about meditation for grounding. Sometimes this confuses people who use meditation for trance, because I've always called that trance state. So if you're someone who's followed my videos before and you've understood what I've meant by a meditative state and a trance state, we're just going to replace those terms here because it's going to fix a lot of confusion, and we'll call it meditative grounding and meditative trance. Both of these are actually states of mind, so you can use meditation to get into these states, or you can use other techniques. And in fact, at the end of this, we'll go over some other options for doing this other than what is considered traditional meditation. I promise you that if you practice these states of mind frequently enough, I personally do them on a daily basis, then you'll learn eventually to enter these states of mind without having to sit and do a meditative practice at all. You can just jump into the meditative grounding state, and you can jump into the meditative trance state almost instantaneously. And that is actually what you're trying to build up to do if you want to use these practices in order to do what we consider magic. Meditative grounding, or meditation to be in the moment, or more simply put, meditation to be, is what most people think of when they think of meditation. The goal is to reach a state where your flittering thoughts and your thoughts about the past and the future disappear, and you're only aware of the current moment. This has been referred to as a Zen-like state, as a flow state, as being grounded, or as a meditative state by many different people. One of the immediate benefits is the removal of stress and the focusing of yourself on what's truly important as opposed to what random thoughts your mind might think are important. Earlier when we talked about meditation, we said you needed to focus on one thing and dispel other thoughts. But we didn't specify what that one thing had to be, and in the early practice it doesn't matter what one thing you focus on. For meditative grounding, that does matter. We're trying to reach a mental state where we are able to be in the moment, which means we have to concentrate on something that's in the moment. This can be done by focusing outward or inward depending on your preference. You can pay attention to the scenery around you, the blowing of the air, the leaves, the movement of the grass, things like that. This works especially well if you're out in nature. If you're someone who prefers focusing inward, you'll get the same results by focusing on yourself, on your senses, on what you're experiencing. Focus on only paying attention to what your senses are giving you, what smells you're able to experience, what sounds you hear, what sights you see, what tastes are in your mouth, what you can feel. Focusing on these things without judgment keeps you from thinking thoughts other than what's happening currently, what you're experiencing right now. If you can do this long enough, you'll often enter a separate mental state altogether, where you no longer have to concentrate on it, but where you just feel present in the moment. You feel as if you are your body right now. This is why it's called a grounding meditation, because it brings you back to center. It brings you back to focus on the current moment in the current place. For me personally, when I used to practice rituals, I would do this kind of meditation before every ritual and after every ritual, as a method of clearing out any of my thoughts before starting the ritual, and as a method of returning to center after. Clearing of the thoughts is what gives this so much power. When you're focused on the present moment, past and future worries fade away, and even though you come back to normal thinking afterward, you'll notice they don't have as strong an impact on you. A short meditation like this can clear away distractions and negative thinking in an instant. It's great for getting you focused on what's important in the moment. It also has the added bonus of reinforcing that these thoughts about the past and future are not the present. Putting you in touch with the present so deeply helps you to see that none of those things that you're worrying about are actually in existence at the present moment. It's in this state of mind that we're able to think clearly about things that we need to do, whether they be now or in the future. So a lot of times this practice can be done right before trying to plan something for the future, or trying to plan a ritual, or beginning a ritual, if you're someone who does practice ritual magic. For me now, it's mostly done before making any major decisions. It's also possible to concentrate on a task while doing this, or on a query or question. In fact, some people will find that they're able to enter this state naturally whenever they're very busy. If, while you're working on something, you find you're only focused on the task at hand, you're getting done what needs to be done, and you're not worrying about the future or the past in that time, then you are actually entering this meditative grounding state while doing that work, which is exactly what eventually you want to do. You want this to become a natural state that you can enter whenever you need to focus on a single task. Another method that some people are able to use to do meditative grounding that isn't a traditional meditation is painting. I'm not talking specifically about creative painting where you're drawing something or making something up from your mind, but rather painting or drawing something that you're looking at to try to recreate it as it appears, or painting something like a miniature or a sculpture. Many people will find that their mind slips into this sort of no-thinking mode where they're concentrating entirely on the work of the painting or the drawing. This is the meditative grounding state. If you're trying to understand what it feels like to be in the meditative grounding state, we've all done it at least once in our lives. Think of a time when you've stared up at a star-filled sky and found no thoughts came to mind, just this feeling, this almost awestruck feeling. Think of a time when you've walked out on a warm spring day and felt the sun on your face after a long time of being indoors. Think of a moment where you've walked out on a windy afternoon and you felt the wind breeze through you and just closed your eyes and allowed that feeling to overtake you. Those are the meditative grounding state. You've experienced it in those moments, however fleeting. The goal here is to experience that when desired and for long periods of time. Now, before we go into meditative trance, which is the other state that we can reach through meditation, I think it's important to mention that, in my opinion, meditative grounding should be learned first. This is because if we start practicing meditative trance, it has a tendency to do the opposite. It takes us away from our present moment and makes it easy to go into flights of fancy sometimes. So meditative grounding is going to help to pull you back to the present if you go a little off course by overusing meditative trance. So, what is meditative trance? In the past, I used to call this the trance state, and that's still what I tend to call it. Some people call it the receptive state. Some people call it the theta-gamma sync, or the theta state. Some people call it the astral state, or the dream state. This is the state you're going to want to get into for everything in magic. Do you want to do journeying or astral travel? Meditative trance is what you need to be in order to make that happen. Do you want to use candle magic or sigil magic? Meditative trance is the state you want to be in order to make that happen. Do you want to evoke, invoke, or channel an entity? Meditative trance is the state you need to be in to make that happen. Unfortunately, meditative trance is also the hardest state to explain how to get into. Once you know how to get into this meditative trance, it's easy to go back. In fact, eventually you can just concentrate on the feeling of being in a meditative trance and you will be pulled back into meditative trance. But getting you there the first few times is hard. I'd like to start by explaining what it feels like to be in a meditative trance. Have you ever been driving down the road and you suddenly notice that time has passed and you don't remember how it passed? It's like your body went on autopilot while your brain went somewhere while you continued driving. That's meditative trance. Have you ever been listening to a song and you just got pulled away in the song, but you weren't present in the current moment, you weren't aware of your room or anything, it was almost like you were pulled completely out of yourself and into your own imaginings? That's meditative trance. That's the state we're trying to hit. Now you can understand from this why meditative grounding is important to learn first, because if you're going to be pushing yourself into that meditative trance state more frequently than it randomly happens to you anyway, you're going to be entering your own mind in a sense, as well as other worlds, perhaps, depending on your views on magic. And you need a way to come back to your sense of self, and that's what your meditative grounding is for. It's for this reason that I suggest when you sit down to do meditative trance that you first do a meditative grounding to clear your mind, then you practice meditative trance, then you do another meditative grounding to come back. It's just going to make things a lot easier on you in the long run. So what are some methods to get into a meditative trance? One of the primary elements is going to be visualization. You're going to either look at something in the real world or imagine something, and you're going to concentrate a lot of your focus on it. People who are familiar with doing sigil magic will notice that this is exactly what you do in sigil magic. You focus entirely on the sigil and stare at it and push your energy into it and focus on it until it begins to blur and dance and jump off the page. That's because that's when you're hitting that trance state. That's the entire point. What you're actually doing is a deep meditation to enter trance, but that's not exactly how it's usually explained to people. Other common visualizations are to stare into a candle's flame, or to imagine a single point in space, or to stare at a black dot that you've put on the wall, or to stare into a black mirror, or a mirror in a dark room, staring into incense, staring into darkness itself. The goal is basically to stare into a single point until you find yourself enveloped by that point. There are methods that don't rely on visualization as much that can be used in combination with visualization, or they can be used on their own. Repetition of a saying is a major way to enter trance, saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. Glossolalia or speaking in tongues can be used to enter trance state as well, just allowing whatever noises to come out of your mouth without giving thought to what they mean. Rocking back and forth, dancing and moving your body in rhythmic fashions, listening to a continuous drum beat, all of these things can help you to enter the trance state. Even smells can help, or seeing certain colors that match up with what you're trying to do. These correspondences are all to help you stay in the trance state and keep focused on whatever it is you're entering the trance state to do. If you keep your eyes open while you enter this state, you'll often see some strange visual anomalies. You may start to see symbols and faces and shapes and things like that just in the things around you. It's not extreme. It's more like looking at one of those 3D picture puzzles that you're supposed to adjust your eyesight for, where things just kind of lose their normal depth and start to take on a different shape. You'll likely see something that looks like white static covering your field of vision, or perhaps a white mist or a fog covering your vision. That's normal as well. You also may notice that sounds are a little different. Tones are slightly off from what you're used to, or you may even hear a ringing in your ears. These are all signs that you're correctly performing the meditative trance. You may even feel nauseous the first few times, but this will pass after a few times of doing it. Now, in the past, if you had asked me what the point of meditative trance was, I would have told you it's the state you need to be in order to do all of your rituals. No matter what ritual it is, whether it's sigil magic, whether it's evoking an entity, whether it's ceremonial magic, candle magic, what have you. Whatever it is you're trying to accomplish using a magical practice, you do it while you're in the trance state. Now, the only reason I say that's what I used to say is because I no longer feel like those rituals are a requirement in order to do these practices. In fact, I've started to find that just being in the trance state allows you to do all those practices without any of the ritual elements. That said, if you're new to this, the ritual can help you stay in the state and keep focused on what it is you're trying to do, and it also helps direct you with ideas of what sorts of things you can do. So, using a traditional path is probably helpful at the beginning. If you're interested in some information about how to do magic while in a meditative trance, or even in how to do magic without rituals and ritual tools, we can talk a bit about what I do right here, but it's obviously not the only end-all be-all, and it's still a work in progress. Almost every form of magic you work on will be broken down into 3 primary steps. The first one is to decide on an intent, the second one is to visualize that intent and push your emotion into it, and the third is to let it out into the universe. Deciding on an intent is really just making a firm decision to cause a change or that you want to learn something. It's going a step further than casually thinking about something and actually entering that state where you've decided, I'm going to act on this. Whether that action is to perform something in the occult in order to get it to come to pass, or whether that action is to go out and do it yourself, it's making that true decision, that determination to do it. And that happens before you enter any of these states. Often I'll do a meditative grounding once I've come up with a decision like that, and then with the clear mind, I will see if I'm still interested in that particular decision. It's almost a check and balance to make sure you're not doing something spur of the moment. Once you've done that, go ahead and enter into your meditative trance, and while you're doing that, visualize what it is that you want to have happen and push your emotion into it. And when I say push your emotion into it, I'm talking about resonance. You need to resonate with whatever it is that you're trying to cause to happen. If you're trying to make something change in the world, you want to resonate, you want to emote as if it's already happened, as if it's happening right now. If you're trying to reach out to an entity, you want to make your emotional state that which you believe the entity's emotional state tends to be. You want to get yourself in the same state of mind that you would think this entity would move about in so that you can connect with it. If you're asking a question, you want to emote the question as honestly and authentically as possible. Once you've done all this and you're in a deep trance, it's time to let it out into the universe. If you're making a change, actually visualize the request that you're making going out from you and spreading out in all directions and going out away from you to be made whole. If you're reaching out to an entity, visualize your request going out to them and offering them a way to come back, accepting them into your life. If your plan is to go on a spiritual journey or have visions, actually let out that question or whatever it is out of you. And as you do, feel what is coming back. feel and wait for those answers to return to you, and then allow whatever it is that comes into your mind to happen so that you can see those visions. And once you're satisfied that you've done what it is that you've meant to do, slowly exit out of the meditative trance, perform a meditative grounding to bring yourself back, and then let go of the entire working, as if you've just accepted that it's done, and it is so. Now for me personally, it's gotten a bit weird lately, because I've gotten to a point where I can enter into the meditative grounding state and the meditative trance state simply by deciding to enter those states. It's gotten that easy for me because I've practiced long enough. Sometimes I can slip between the states so quickly that I don't even really notice that that's what I'm doing, because it's become habitual to go from one state to the other in everything that I do. So at this point, I may decide that I have a question for the entity Tiamat. I'll take one conscious breath, breathe in to the count of 3, hold to the count of 3, breathe out to the count of 3, taking that moment to ground myself, and as it concludes, I'll think about the question again and decide if I really do want to ask it to her. If I do, I'll instantly enter the trance state and put all my visualization and emotion into reaching out to Tiamat so that I can establish a connection, and once I have, I'll ask the question, and then allow whatever comes back to be received by my mind. Once I have an answer, I thank Tiamat and exit the meditative trance, entering immediately into the meditative grounding state, and then come from the meditative grounding state back to normal reality. To anyone who hasn't practiced this, it will sound like a flight of fancy. And in fact, I believe that's why all of the ritual, pomp, and circumstance is so important at the beginning, because our minds can't grasp the idea that we can do something this easily. So I'm left with the realization that if you're just starting out and you want to know where to begin, meditation is what you have to do first. And if you're someone who's seasoned and you want to know where to go next, we're right back to meditation and just stripping off some of the layers of what we've become reliant upon. Now, I definitely don't want to step on the toes of people who have established methods. I'm not saying that this is a better method than any of the other rituals or methods that are out there. In fact, if the rituals help you get a stronger connection than I get from this, you may argue that your rituals are better than what I'm doing. What I'm trying to point out, though, is that these forms of meditation are needed whether you do the rituals or not, and that there are methods to do the same things without the rituals. Whether they're up to the same standards or not is what I'm still working to discover myself. Lastly, I'd like to talk deeply about the fact that not all meditation has to be sitting and breathing techniques. We've already given the example of painting. Also, the example of being completely pulled into your work. The example of listening to music or playing music was used. The example of visualization techniques. All of these things can be a replacement for the standard forms of meditation. The goal is to reach the right states and to do them daily. If you find that you can enter a state that's equivalent to what I'm calling meditative grounding, and a state that's equivalent to what I'm calling meditative trance, then you've already found your own methods for entering those states. Practice entering those states daily until you can enter those states without any method. I personally like the example of the walking meditation. That's when you go out, walk in nature, and just pay attention to the things that you see. This is an easy way to do a meditative grounding without having to sit still. You can also sometimes enter meditative trance this way if you're following a path or if you're jogging or doing something like that. Allowing your mind to just go into wherever it goes. Walking, hiking, these sorts of things can be their own path to meditation. But what if you'd like a more traditional form of meditation, but you have a respiratory system problem and can't focus on your breathing? Well, if you're someone who can hear your heartbeat, focus on that. It'll work just as well. Visualize energy or air coming in and out of you as your heart beats. And if you're someone who can't hear your heartbeat, try to use your imagination and imagine that pulsing, the pulsing of energy coming in and out, and in and out. And don't worry so much about breath or anything else like that. All that said, those of you who are able to focus on breath, you will find that that does work the best. Even science has started to prove that when we take deep breaths from our diaphragm, it helps us to relieve stress all on its own. So if you're able to do the breathing exercises, it's going to work best. Another YouTuber that I greatly respect, Tobias Lars, has a practice he calls taking one conscious breath. It's basically the three-folds breath, but while you're breathing in, holding, and then letting it out, you're visualizing something that you want to see change in your own life. Doing this, even occasionally, can bring major changes to any normal individual's life. And if you do this in tandem with these meditative states, I'm honestly not sure what the limit is. So this is my rather lengthy video on meditation, which also happens to include how to do all magic. Going forward, for anyone who reaches out to me on Facebook and says, how do I get started with magic? I'm just going to link you to this video. I thank you all for listening, and until next time, safe travels.